What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Kettlebell Guys Show. This is part 2 of your Follow Your Personal Legend podcast series, where Sean and I talk about one of the hardest decisions that we've ever made, which was shutting down Chicago Primal Gym and ultimately deciding to start what we do now, which is kettlebell transformation. This was a hard-hitting episode, one that made Sean and I really reflect on the decisions we had to make, and I think you guys are going to get a lot of value out of it. I think you guys are going to really like it. So with that being said, here is part 2. If you're experiencing fear, like if you're experiencing anxiousness or whatever over a certain decision, like that's normal. Like that's part of the process. You have to have that. And if you have that, you know you're on the right track.
Yeah.
And
Right.
also what you said there, I think is so important of like, all you need to know is what step 1 is, because you will never be able to predict what all the things that are going to happen to help you build that vision, to help
Right.
you continue to go down that path. You could never predict, you could never know what they're going to be.
Right.
You got to have the courage to be able to have the fear, face the fear, and make the decision despite the fear, and then take all of the actions that have to happen in step 1 to go from step 0 to step 1. Like have the courage to do all those things despite being fearful and
Right.
anxious and worried and wondering what's next. Anyways,
So true. But you bring up such a good point though, because I think back to spending 12 plus months in the job at Eaton. And the reason I didn't leave was because I was afraid to quit that job without knowing what I was going to do next. I think about spending 10 months, looking for different spaces, waiting to find a partner for Chicago Primal Gym before I finally opened the gym on my own at the space that felt anything but ideal. And in both instances, I was looking for certainty in order to be able to make my next move. But the
right.
thing is I spent all that time, 22 months of my life looking for certainty that wasn't necessary. In fact, not only was it not necessary, but it was entirely impossible to gain because it wasn't until I actually made the move that the world was able to start conspiring in my favor. And so the only thing I needed to do, I could have, I'm not saying that I would go back and change anything, but if anybody is thinking about it and like, yeah, but I just can't do it yet because I just don't quite know yet. It's like, dude, stop right now. Because if you know you're following your personal legend, which like I knew that quitting that job was what had to happen. I knew that opening a gym was what had to happen. I just knew it. If I would have just done it, I could have saved myself a lot of anguish because you search for certainty, but the more time goes by when you're stuck doing something that you know is not your personal legend, you just build up anxiety. You just build up this stress. You just build up this feeling of your life not being what it could be.
People want to have certainty in the outcome. They want to have certainty that it's going to be worth it, when in reality, the only thing that you have to be certain of is that you're going to do the work needed to go from step 0 to step 1.
That's so
Like
true.
the only thing you have to be certain of is that I know I'm going to do this work, and
Mm,
like I can count on that. And so, and I know that if I do that work, something is going to unfold. There's going to be an
right.
outcome of that work. And so then it's going to open the next door. And then I'm going to
Yeah.
be, I know that I'm going to know the work that I need to be certain of to do, go from step 1 to step 2.
Right.
Like so many people, I think, need to have certainty in the outcome. It's going to be worth it for me to put my time and energy into it, when like you already know that. Like if you already are feeling feelings of wanting to change or whatever it may be in your life for any specific reason whatsoever, that means you already know that it's going to be worth it. You don't have to have certainty around what the outcome actually is going to be, but if you have the instinct of feeling that you want to make a change into certain something, you already know it's going to be worth it. So then you just have to be certain you know what to do next.
Yeah. And just believing that everything is figure outable,
Right.
just like so many people stress about trying to think about every outcome or
Which is
get
normal.
anxious about work coming up next week or whatever it is. And it's just like Eckhart Tolle talks about the anxiety gap. Like the
Mm,
anxiety gap is you thinking about something now that has not happened yet.
yeah.
And so it's literally you're trying to deal with the future. But the thing is you can't deal with the future. The future is
Right.
not known. That's why it's the future. So
Right.
like any time that you spend in the present, cast out into the future, by the very nature of how life works, it's going to create anxiety. That's where anxiety comes from. It's being casted out in the future instead of being in the present.
Right.
And so rather than trying to figure out how things are going to unfold, instead you should just understand that if you set the wheels in motion, you have the personal power to be able to deal with whatever comes your way, to be able to put your
Correct.
best foot forward. That's all you need to believe. Because if you can believe that, then like Grant said, it's like all you need to do is say, what's the next step that I need to take? What's the
Right.
next thing that I need to do to start this? Right? It's belief in yourself
Belief in
and
yourself.
belief in yourself, but also this like belief in whatever you can call it, whatever you want. You can call it God, you can call it a higher power, fate, whatever it is, but just like this belief that the world rewards people who are willing to believe in themselves and who are willing to listen to that voice in their head that's telling them to do something greater or something different than they're doing. You think that that voice comes from you, but like a lot of times I feel like maybe that voice doesn't necessarily come from you. Maybe that voice comes from like the
From the universe.
unmanifested of the world, of the universe, right?
Yeah.
And it's just calling you to manifest it.
Right.
And it might be saying something very certain, very clear to you. It might be something that's not clear at all. That's just like this underlying hum of just like, go do something, right? Go on this journey and let what happens happen. I've already written the journey for you.
Right. Yeah.
You just have to go on it.
Yeah. It's almost like how much discomfort are you willing to I don't like using the word endure, but kind of, it's like what level of discomfort are you willing to endure to be able to go follow what you feel called to do?
If you're as miserable as I was in the
Right.
career that I was in, that was pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Feeling like I was just
100%.
wasting my life, that was uncomfortable. And I feel like that's like it's what a lot of people. It makes me so sad when people talk about hating their job. It's like, well, then just quit.
Right.
If you really truly hate your job, quit. Now, maybe you can't quit because you've got a mortgage and you've got kids and you got family. And one of the things that you had asked me about before we turned the recording on, right, was like, so how do you feel like your beliefs about that have changed over the years, right?
Or yeah, and it's a question I'll ask you at the end, which is the thought process of do you feel like, if you were confronted with these decisions, if you were at the beginning of your timeline, but being now, age
Yeah.
38, two kids, mortgage,
Hmm.
husband, you're big provider for your family, like versus being a 23-year-old, who
Right.
where you have a lot of leeway for quote unquote failure or, being able to reset things in your life.
Right.
Um, which we can answer that at the end, but I also think it's important too, there's a couple more examples for us specifically of this theme for us
Mm.
as a business and as our evolution over the last 5+ years. And I think we should hit those before we wrap
Yeah.
up.
The last one that I wanted to touch on really is kind of how kettlebell transformation came to fruition, which you can definitely interject here since this is such a shared experience for you and I. But when COVID hit in 2020, like February 2020,
Yep.
I can remember it was like 48 hours before Chicago announced that they were going to shut down the businesses, right? And like we saw the writing on the wall already, and so we actually announced to our community, I think before Chicago announced, but we just knew we're like, okay, it's just going to be like a week. So we decided that we were going to give the kettlebells, all of our kettlebells out. So we had this big like bell giveaway, right? We literally gave 200 kettlebells out to our clients so they could take them home and we're going
Right.
to do our first recorded workout, right? And so we record the workout, hilarious. We should definitely reel the tape on that one. But then we spent the next 15 months trying to keep the Chicago Primal Gym community afloat, filming workouts that cost us a lot to film, not
Right.
making any money. Grant and I were both waking up at 3:30 a.m. daily, probably as much for anxiety as for thinking that we were doing important work that was going to build our business. I remember at one point Richard Greaves just was like, "Are you guys okay?" It's like, "No, Richard, we are not." And we bottled a lot of that up. We held a lot of that inside because we wanted to show this feeling of like everything's fine, everyone can still stay fit, like we're all still working out at home, everything's good. And I can remember for so long, Grant and I talked about just like, we don't want to do this anymore. Like, it's just doesn't feel right. Our lease was coming up fairly soon, and like we saw like when how are we ever going to get back to actually being in the gym? And then our lease is going to be up, and like, are we going to re-sign a lease at this place? No, we're not going to do that. So we're going to have to go find a new one. And like, and I can still remember you coming over to my place, and we sat on our back deck, on my back deck, and you were just like, I don't want to own a gym anymore. And I was like, I don't want to own a gym anymore either. And it's not like that was the first time that we had felt that way, right? But a lot of times it takes time. You have to really let this stuff kind of materialize. So it's like just
Right.
because you feel something doesn't mean you need to take action on it right away. It's
Right.
definitely okay to let these, but at some point, the pull becomes so strong that
Well,
you
that
either take
period,
action or you need to let it go and forget about it.
right. That period was such an emotional roller coaster, which we'll get
Truly.
into another day, because like Sean said, we made the decision to, proactively shut down. So, saying we're going to run a virtual class instead of an in-person class when a lot of our all of our members expected us to continue to be open for at least another few days or another week, right? And so we're like, no, we're gonna nip it in the bud. We're gonna run a virtual class. We're gonna get ahead of this because we knew it was coming. And then on that first live workout, I think we had like 150, 200 people on it. And so I remember the feeling at the end of that first live virtual workout being like, okay, like that was awesome. Like it was kind of a high. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have something here. That high was followed by a lot of very treacherous times
Mm.
and very similar to the alchemist in his journey. It was a lot of trying to figure out how in the world do you run a virtual fitness style business. And there's also just like there's very specific things about it, right? Which is paying our lease. We paid for our lease every month for the 15 months that we were not open running classes,
Mm.
kept all of our employees. There's a lot of specific things there that made it very challenging for us, right?
Right.
That we don't have to get into specifics on, but there were a handful of highs of like, okay, we got something figured out. I remember specifically we were running a virtual promotion of doing a 21-day challenge, and we had had some initial success with signing people up for it, like new people, and it was like exciting because holy wow, we're signing up people we had never met before, never trained with us in the gym, and now they're training with us virtually, and that was a really exciting time for us. And I remember specifically we were on like a mastermind call with Gym Launch, and one of the guys who's on it, he's from Texas, and he was talking about like trying to acquire new members into his virtual gym in Texas. And you texted me on the side, and you said, "You know what all those people in Texas are going to do? They're going to join the 21-day challenge." You're like, "I know where all those people are going to do in Texas. They're going to join us." We had like a month of success, maybe less, 2 to 4 weeks of success running that promotion, but then that promotion got expensive, started to not work as well. Then it started to crumble, right? And so then we were like, okay, well, we got to find a different strategy. And so there was just so many highs and so many lows in that time period of 15 months where we were thinking about doing something different. We were thinking about, like, it was a thought in the back of our minds, and then came, over the course of those 15 months, came more and more to the forefront of us actually talking about it, which is,
Right.
okay, if we didn't do this, what would we do? And if we didn't reopen the gym, what would we do? That's like during that time period of you're not doing nothing, right? You're doing stuff. You're trying to figure out what your path should be, and
Exactly.
you're experiencing a lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot
Right.
of stuff that's teaching you and stuff that's guiding you towards what ultimately is going to be the right choice for you. Which for
Right.
us, like you said, was us both deciding, okay, we don't want to reopen the gym, which at the time felt like for you and I felt like a lot of relief, but was quickly met with a lot of lash back from
Yeah.
people who had been with
Backlash.
us. Yeah, yeah, backlash. There you go. How did I say that? Backlash from people who had been with us for a long time.
Yeah.
And
Right. But that's what happens when you follow your personal legend is, you're probably going to get backlash from some people because they're not going to understand. They're
right.
not going to understand what's truly in your heart. They're not going to understand how you truly feel about, like, because we tried to make the virtual Chicago Primal Gym work for so long,
Mm.
15 months. And for the last 6, 7, 8 months of that, we knew that it was no longer right for us. We had gone far enough away from being back in the gym with our clients, which had like this lure of being so awesome, especially for our clients, because it was their third place and it was a great community. But for a long time, even when we were open, you and I had the frustrations of just like, it's a lot to manage. We don't really make a whole lot of money, which of course, money wasn't the only reason we were in it, but it was certainly, we wanted to feel successful as professionals.
How do we
But
grow? How do we impact more people?
yeah,
Yeah.
but we knew for quite some time, and that voice internally just kept getting louder and louder, like this just and it isn't right. But one of the big reasons that we didn't pull the plug on Chicago Primal Gym earlier was the same reason as I've alluded to before, which is that
Mhm.
fear of like, I mean, I think there was a very real fear there of like, we didn't want to let a lot of people down that we cared about. So
Right.
that was definitely a big part of it. But
Dude,
I can also very readily admit that a big part of it was the fear of like, okay, well, if we shut this thing down and let this thing go,
then what?
then what? Then my identity is gone. Like my identity as the owner and founder of Chicago Primal Gym is gone. And I just, what am I going to flush 7 years of my life down the toilet? The truth is the same thing happened then as happened all the previous times, which is it took us shutting that business down to then have the doors open to all the things that came next after that for us, which, led us to kettlebell transformation. And there's just no way that would have happened had we not made the very hard decision to just one day finally both bring into existence what it is that we had been feeling for so long, which was, I don't know what's going to come next, but I know that this thing has run its course and I got to go follow what I'm being called to do, which I can't even sense yet, but I know it's going to be there and I know it'll get much louder if I stop having all this noise from this thing that isn't the right thing for me.
Boy, what you said there about like that was our identity. I'll try not to get into too much of that, but that's kind of the same thing with people being able to make any big changes in their life, whether it be from a career or relationship or whatever, that it is such a part of your identity of who you are that that's where the fear comes from. That's like a lot of the fear. It's almost it's like I wonder what on what spectrum it's like the fear of the not knowing what the thing is in the future versus the fear of just changing what you had been for a
Right.
very long time.
Yeah.
That was such a huge thing for me. I remember it being such a challenging time for me personally because I remember when I came to CBG and I met you initially, it was from day one when I did my first workout at CBG. In my bones, I was like, I need to be here. Like this is where I'm supposed to be. I just knew it. And I had been, and like this is when I'd come to Chicago, I'd already gone to like two or three other gyms to like go work out and meet the owners and see if I could get a job. And when I came to CPG, I just knew it. And then ever since I, started working there and you and I partnered up and then we grew it and we went through all the different trials and tribulations, it was like, it was who I was. It was my place at CPG and being one of the leaders of this community in this place. And then when that was gone, when we decided to shut that down, even though I knew that our path was the next thing, that our biggest impact that we could make in the world was whatever the next thing was going to be, which we weren't even sure what that was going to be. It was such a hard time for me personally. We like didn't talk for like 3 months. We took a break.
Can
Like, but those 3 months for me,
you believe that?
I know it's hard as I can barely remember it. Those 3 months for me were so challenging because I had lost my identity. There's another book that you turned me onto, which is Way of the Peaceful Warrior. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And it's a story of Dan Millman. And his identity in that story was that he was a gymnast. He was an incredible gymnast. And there's a part in the story where he wins the championship, like the college championship. I think he went to UCLA and he won the college championships. And he like it was his dream. His entire life was to reach that pinnacle of his athletic endeavor. That was his identity. And he in the book at the end of a chapter, there's a moment where he won the championship. It celebrated, for like 48 hours, and he was on the plane home, and he said in the book that tears just started streaming down his eyes because he didn't know who he was anymore without that. I don't know who I am, even though I just achieved what I thought was going to be like the pinnacle of of my
Right.
success, of what I've wanted for 20 plus years. He's like, I still feel empty because I don't know who I am. And I felt the same way. Regardless of that, like regardless of feeling those feelings, we still knew it was the right choice. He still knew deep down it was the right choice because it didn't feel right to go the other direction. It did not feel right to be like, no, 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 no. Let's just hang on a little longer. Let's hang on. We can wait a few extra months and then we'll reopen the gym, sign another 5 year lease, get the gym going again. That didn't feel right.
Yeah. I was like, if we do this and it works out, will we be happy?
Right.
No.
No,
So then the only right move is to choose not to do that. Because we get so stuck in that, like, this is who I am. And it's like that, but that's not who you are.
that's not who you
Who
are.
you are has nothing to do with what you do for a
Mm,
living.
yes.
And of course we can get, we can get as deep as we want into stuff like this, but that's kind of what I was getting to before, with which is like everything is figure outable. If you stop this thing that you've got so much identity wrapped up into, whether it's your career or a relationship or whatever it is, like, yeah, it's gonna be painful when you stop that thing, because everything you know and think about yourself is tied into this thing. And there might be a period of time where you feel like you're going through this valley of just like darkness. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my purpose is anymore. I don't know where I belong. I don't know what's next. And like that is necessary. You have to go through that if you're going to truly transform into something new. Or you can choose to stay stuck. You can choose to continue to just feel this constant feeling of you're letting your life pass by without actually following your personal legend. But in my personal feelings and my experience, that is always much worse. I would rather walk through that valley of darkness than be stuck in something that is just this constant, like, feeling, this nagging feeling of just, I am letting my one life go and pass me by without doing what I feel like I'm being called to do. And like, if that means I got to walk through some shit and like feel a high level of uncertainty and stress and anxiety because I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know what's going to happen, I'll take that because I know I can figure it out.
You made such a good point there. You are not what you do. You are the individual who has the power to do whatever it is you want to do.
You know,
That's who you are, not labeled by what you do or where you live or your career
or what other people think.
or other people's perception of you. Yeah,
Oh
correct.
man, if we would have listened to all the things that we were told by all the different people who were important to us, at that time when we shut down Chicago Primal Gym, who were all amazing people, who all certainly didn't probably mean anything personal towards us about it, but they just
100%.
didn't know what was in our heart. They didn't
Right.
know the experiences that we'd had over the last 15 months. And you just have to like, you have
Right.
to understand that. Like, people will say things, especially when you decide to follow your personal legend, they will challenge you. People you care deeply about. I can still remember my dad saying to me, how could you guys choose to not coach women? You just cut out 50% of your clients. How could you do that? And I just remember being like, Dad, you don't understand. You don't have my perspective on things. And of course, that'll be its own episode,
Yeah.
but
A lot of people asking for that episode.
yeah, but people just, you have to understand that, like, if it feels right to you, I feel like, with the caveat is like, as long as you're not doing something that's going to directly harm people, like as long as
Right.
you're not like,
Can't
but
feel
if you feel
good about
like, if you feel like it is your purpose, it is your passion, you're being called to it, and you feel like it also can benefit the greater world, you got to expect some pushback, and you got to be okay with that. You got to be able to
it. Right.
listen to the detractors and say, okay, I hear you, I see you, but like, you also don't know what's going on inside of me and the experiences that I had, and you also don't know the vision that I have in my head, because no one's going to see your vision the way that you see it, even if
Right.
your vision isn't clear, because
Right.
our vision wasn't clear at the time, and
Right.
it's
No
still
one's gonna
not.
know.
But
No one
but no
knows
one's
your
going to know
truth.
those things. Yeah, no
Yeah.
one knows your truth. Only you know your truth. So you got to be able to follow that, and you got to expect that, hey, if you follow your truth, a lot of times your truth is going to very much go against conventional wisdom and what kind of society has built up for us. And so if that happens, a lot of people, for various reasons, are going to start to maybe come down on you a little bit. And a lot of times I feel like some of that might be because their feeling of not taking that path when they wish they would have starts to creep up, right?
Yep.
Not to
Someone
label anyone with that, but I think that happens.
for
People,
sure.
they
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
it reminds them that they didn't follow their path the way that they wanted to. So you just have to be okay with, you got to be
Yeah.
able to hear negativity and doubt from others, even if that doubt is inside of you, and just
Yeah.
understand, nope, if you're following your personal legend, things will start to
Yeah.
conspire in your favor. That is how the world works.
But it's being able to, it's like another thing of like, when you do that, you just got to make the assumption that the universe is going to challenge you, and it's going to come, and
Right.
it's from the universe. It's just testing that, like, are you going to follow
Are you
through?
sure? Are you
Because if
sure?
you because if you are, and you have the courage to continue to move forward, we're going to reward you.
Right. Mm,
And that's the experience I think that we've had with kettlebell transformation. 2.5 years into this, almost 3 years into this. Next fall will be 3 years. We had our fair share of the universe challenging us in our first 6+ months of whether we
absolutely.
continue to go down this path. But boy, at this point now, we've run 450, 500 plus men through this system. We've got 250 to 300 guys who are active right now. And I think just guys who in their own unique way, KT has impacted their lives individually. And just the fact that like that would have never been a thing had we just not had the courage to continue to go down the path that we felt was right for us.
And there's also one other thing that you mentioned before that I think is, you said a lot of times if people are going to doubt the decision you make, it might be because it stirs up feelings inside of them that they, maybe didn't follow their personal legend. I think another really important thing to understand, at least this is my belief on it, which is a lot of times as well, people will maybe not agree with when you do something that is kind of following your personal legend, because a lot of times when you're going to follow your personal legend, what's going to unfold from there is not even clear to you. So it's definitely not clear to someone else who's not living your life. But a lot of times people on the outside will look at your life situation and say, "Oh, but you've got it so good." I can't tell you how many times I still get asked, like, "So are you ever going to reopen another gym in person? You must miss that so much." I'm just like, dude, you just don't even know. You have
Right.
no perspective that is based on reality of what it was like to own a gym or what that business was actually like. And so I think you have to understand that, like, if people can't see the vision that you have, and if they start to doubt the decisions that you're making that you feel in your bones are the right decision to make, I mean, how often are we guilty of looking at someone else and thinking, oh, they must have it so much better. They've got it so much better than I do. They've got everything figured out. Like, oh, that their life must be perfect. It's like, no,
Yeah.
like you just don't even know anything about that person's actual reality
Right.
or what the situation of their life is experienced like by them.
Right. And they don't have the same perspective. They don't have the same lived experience of like
Right.
every moment to moment lived experience. And that's okay. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
that
totally okay.
that comes back to like being comfortable, being like in your own 2 feet,
Right.
standing right where you are and making decisions for
Right.
yourself, because that can be enough.
Yeah, and it's like you said, if it's someone who cares about you, like for the instance of my dad being like, how could you guys do that? Like that was coming from a place of love. Of like you're gonna throw away what you've built. Like
Right.
don't do that, right? But it's not because he was like, how could you do that? It's like based on the information that he had at the time, it was like this isn't the right decision. Right. But it's
Right.
like, yeah, but you only have 1% of the information that I have. So
Right.
I know that it's the right decision.
Yeah.
Right. I feel it in my bones. You can't be in my bones. And
Right.
that's where it's like, it's definitely important. I feel like to talk about it with people who you care about and to get opinions on and to have deep conversations with and to see kind of test the waters on these different things. But at the end of the day, following your personal legend is about listening to what's in your own heart, not letting other people guide you.
Okay. So let's kind of go full circle on this, and let's wrap up by asking the question that I asked you before we went live, was being in the place you are now versus being, 22 and having your whole life ahead of you, less
Mhm.
responsibilities. Do you think you would do things differently? And or how would you think about it differently now versus maybe, being a 22-year-old, for people who
Yeah.
are, maybe in a different place in their life and are still feeling these feelings of wanting to make big shifts or big changes?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously as you get older, and you have certain financial responsibilities that you can't get rid of those. Like I've got a 5 and a 2-year-old who need to go to school. I've got a mortgage that I have to pay. If my wife didn't have any income and I had the sole job, I couldn't just quit that job. So that part would be different in the sense that I probably wouldn't be able to do what I did before, which was just like flat out quit, even though I had nothing else planned. But I think what I would say is that I think there's something very real about just like being comfortable in something but hating that thing, like a job, for instance, versus getting into a job that doesn't mean anything to you but allows you to pay the bills. Just like something temporary versus like a career that you're stuck in. To me, those are different things. And there might need to be like a stepping stone
Right.
to the world of uncertainty. But I think what happens a lot of times with people is they get stuck in these roles that consume so much of their life, at least from a professional career standpoint, that they know is not right for them. And I think the lesson that I would impart to someone, even if they had certain financial responsibilities, would be like, can you replace your income somehow with something that is not this career that you're stuck in, that you know you hate and you know you don't want to be in? Because as
Right.
soon as you cut that thing that you know is not what you want to do, even if you have to go and work a different job, you get freed up from how much that thing holds you back, and how being in that thing that is not your personal legend prevents the world from conspiring in your favor. And
Right.
that to me is like the thing that I would never lose sight of, which
Right.
is you only get the benefit of the world conspiring in your favor when you follow your personal legend. And so if you know your personal legend is not to be in a certain career or a certain relationship or whatever it may be, then it doesn't necessarily mean based on your life situation that you should just like quit that with nothing else, with no, prospect of being able to earn an income to pay your mortgage and pay for your kids to go to school. But can you get out of that one thing, find something temporary or whatever it may be, or just do whatever you have to do to create some time and to cut this thing from your life? Like,
Yeah.
how can you do that? That's like, how can you do that one thing? It doesn't have to be the thing that you're going to do long term, but you have to cut that thing as soon as you can.
Right. Because so much of our lives is like a math equation, right? Like if you're trying to replace your income from like a career standpoint, whether you want to do something that you're more passionate about and you feel stuck in a job that you hate, that you absolutely hate what you do every day, right?
Yeah.
It does become kind of a math equation, and you might have to have that time where, you know, you work your 9 to 5 and then you come home till 8 9 p.m. with the kids, and then you have to spend 9 to 11 trying to figure out
Totally.
how does that math equation work for you. You might have to spend that time, right? If you don't do that, you're getting kind of, like you said, you're getting double taxed because you're already in something that you don't want to be in, which means you don't get to have the space to go figure out what you want to do next. But it's also, like you said, it's just noise, right? It's like that's the double. It's like it's the noise, it's the amount of time that your energy is spent getting taken up by the thing that you know is not right for you,
Right.
which you don't have that space or that capacity, and you will never know what it's like to experience the what the world has to offer, you know, how the world will conspire, unless you find ways to let go of that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you
Truly.
find ways to give yourself the space and the capacity to then be filled with the inspiration from the universe of what the next steps need to be. All of that is courage, right? Because it's like some people, like you said, some people have it way harder than others, right? You might have 3 4 5 kids. You might be in a job that you hate. You spend all of your time outside of your job with your family and being the dad and being the husband. And it can be almost impossible to find that 30 minutes a day to think about, well, what else would I do? But I said almost, you know, almost impossible, because there's always a way of some way, shape, or form. But it's just, and I say that with such a grain of salt because I don't have kids. You know, I'm not in the same position, right? And
Right.
I'm not trying to say that from experience, but I do believe, based on just like my own personal experience of anything in my life, is that it is always going to come down to just like courage of your ability to just be like, all right, I'm gonna go for it. And
Right.
then slowly but surely is trying to find the, you know, the space and the capacity to make the shift that you want to make.
Yeah. And you also talked about the energy that gets freed up. which is, I think, the key thing, right? You talked about it being a double-edged sword, which it is, right? It's like on one end, energy gets freed up when you leave the thing that you know is not the right path for you. And then the second thing is not only does your energy get freed up, but now because you followed the path and did the hard thing, even though you're uncertain about what's next, now the world starts to conspire in your favor. So now you have both of these things working for you. Now you have your personal power and your energy back, and you also have the world conspiring in your favor. And so that's where I'd look at it and I'd say, okay, if somebody's, let's just say hypothetically, they're in a job that they know, they're in a career that they know is not what they want to do. But let's say they're making, good money. Let's say they're making $10,000 a month or whatever, right? But let's say maybe they only need $6,000 a month to bring home for their family to be able to get by.
Right.
Well, when you're thinking about, okay, I need to replace my income, like just in this particular example, it would be like, find something that makes you 6,000. Not some, don't wait for something that's going to make you the full 10,000 back,
Right.
because how much would you pay right now to no longer have that feeling every single day that you have now, which is, I hate what I'm doing. I would do anything but this.
Right.
And how much would you pay to start having the world conspire in your favor? Because here's the thing: as soon as you leave that thing and you take that massive pay cut, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to figure out how to make it back, and you're going to have the energy and the space and the benefit of the rest of the world to help you to go find that thing and to go start bringing that back into your life. So it's just like, again, it just gets back to like, how would my experience change now? It would be like, okay, what is the absolute bare minimum that I would need to be able to still keep my family afloat? Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I need to have the certainty on now. Don't tell me you don't have a bunch of expenses that don't need to be there. They're there, but they don't need to be there. And if you didn't have the money, you could just cut them. They would be gone. Like,
Right.
find all those things, do anything you can, man, because to me, it was always this feeling of like, if I don't love what I'm doing, there's nothing else in the world that is more important to me than figuring out what it is I do want to do. It's just like before I felt like I was strong and when I hated my body. It was like there's nothing else I could think about other than getting that feeling away from me.
Right.
And that's what led me into kettlebells.
That's the math equation, right? Because like if it's spending, say it's taking you 50 to 60 hours a week to make the 10K a month, but you can find something that is going to take you 30 hours a week to make 6K a month, and you just got 30 hours back from what you
Yeah.
were spending before. And it's like you have no clue what you could go create with those 30 hours. I don't know what the other 30 hours is going to bring me. I don't know what the end outcome is going to be, but I know that it's is worth it. Because like you said, for us in the gym, of like, well, if it worked out over here, do we want that end outcome? I know I don't want that. Well, then you can't keep doing that.
Right. You got to cut it. If you know that you're in a career that, and this is just obviously one example, but if you know you're in a career that
Right.
you don't want to be in and that you don't want to advance in, and you can look at people who are higher up than you and say, I don't want that. Well, then what are you doing? It's your one life. Like, cut
Right.
that thing. Even if
Right.
it means taking a massive pay cut, even if it means creating massive uncertainty in your life. Good. Now you'll have the space to go figure out what it is you actually want to do. Because so many people I feel like they falsely assume that they need to figure out what it is that they want before they let go of this thing. And I've always had the experience and the belief that it's not until you let go of this thing that you will be able to figure out what it is you want. So if you're always going to hold on to that thing, waiting until you kind of figure it out, or waiting until there's more certainty, well, guess what? It's never going to come, because the only thing that you have to do is you got to let go of this thing. And that's the hardest part. That's the scariest part, but it's not until you do that. That's the whole purpose of the podcast. It's not until you follow your personal legend that the world conspires in your favor. And so
Beautiful way to
my
wrap it up.
strategy might be slightly different, but my mindset would be the exact same.
That's a beautiful way to wrap it up.
Hope somebody out there quits their job today.
I'll wrap it up by saying I am eternally grateful to you for following your personal legend, for you just making all the uncomfortable decisions that you've made in your life. And whether you realize it or not, I think the magnitude of the impact that it's had on me, that you've had on me, and that like the way that you view the world and the way that you shaped that worldview through you choosing to do all these things has had such an impact on me that just, my gratitude could never be enough for that, because it's changed my entire life. So
The world conspired in both of our favors to bring us together and ultimately do what I felt like a decade ago was the most important thing, which was to just try to impact as many people as possible. I could say the same thing to you. I firmly believe that had we not partnered up, I would have never had true success at CPG. KT would have never existed. We wouldn't have been able to impact as many people as we have. So, that just gets back to this idea of just like all the good things start happening when you lean into the uncertainty. And
Yeah.
when you follow that path that is unknown, but you feel being called down it, then all this amazing stuff starts to happen. And then you're able to
Yeah.
look back and say, oh, yeah, that's what happened. Oh, that's what happened. Right. But it's like most people never walk that path, man. And so I'm grateful that walking that path led me to you, and grateful that we continue to push each other in that way. And I hope anyone listening to this has someone that they can talk to about this deeper stuff. Cause I feel like one of the things we talk about a lot is the stuff that's, a layer deeper of the life stuff rather than, just the business stuff. And if you don't, boy, I would encourage you to write in a journal, not to get tangenty or off topic at the end here, but before I knew you, I did so much writing in my journal. And honestly, a lot of it is what we talk about now these days. But
And
it's
now
just
you
like this,
forwarded
just
me.
like, right. But it's like just trying to think through and figure out like what's going on in my head. What is my heart telling me? Like what actually is important to me? And it's like, if you
Yeah.
don't take the time to do that, that's not just going to happen in your life. Your life will just continue to pass you by without you doing anything that you really want to do. So you got to be willing to go figure that out and get uncomfortable and get out of situations that aren't right for you and seek for more if that's what you feel being called to. So, I mean, we shape our own world or we don't. We create our own reality or we just let things happen to us. And I think it's like you said at the very beginning of this show. Like obviously, you and I, we're white men in America. We have a lot of privilege. I don't discount that at all. But anyone can pull out a piece of paper and start writing about what's in their heart and writing about what's truly important to them and trying to come up with ways to take that next step forward. I hope you do that. If you're listening and you're feeling being called to something, start with just a blank piece of paper. Just start writing, start
Yeah.
figuring that out. Go read a book like The Alchemist. Go read a book like Think and Grow Rich. Like
Yeah.
start taking control and trying to craft your own life and start trying to really figure out what your spirit and what your heart is telling you. Because if you listen, you start to hear it more. But
Yeah.
if you don't listen, if you just drown yourself with TV and booze and stuff like that, like you never hear that stuff.
Yeah.
You never get the opportunity to actually listen and like get to that deeper layer of what's truly important to you. So,
No one will create your personal legend for you.
and no one's going to push you down that path either.
Right.
Like, in fact, you might find yourself pushing people away from you in order to walk down that path, which is hard.
As always, you can find us, Sean and I, at the Kettlebell Guys. You can find us on YouTube at the Kettlebell Guys. Follow me on Instagram at Kettlebell Grant or Kettlebell Sean. We're in the process of trying to get on every organic channel. So eventually, we're going to have a TikTok and revitalize a Facebook account, maybe a LinkedIn account. Never had a LinkedIn
Wow.
account in my life,
Amazing.
but
Amazing. We'll be everywhere. We'll be
yeah,
omnipresent.
yeah, that's right. But if you got this far in the podcast, we are so appreciative of anybody who tunes in. Truly,
Yeah.
Sean and I just we love doing it, and so anyone who is listening and who appreciates it and who tunes in every week, boy, we are so grateful for you as well. So
Thank you.
thanks for
Well,
sharing your story, Seamus. That was
yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for bringing it out and encouraging me to do this one. It's fun.
oh. That being said, we'll see you in the next episode.
All right.
Thanks for listening, y'all.
Goodbye.